Hi, this is Zach with Worn&Wound. Today I'll be taking a look at the Sinn Ezm 10. If you're a fan of Sinn, if you're a fan of chronographs, if you're a fan of pilot's watches, this is a watch you absolutely have to know about. It's a top-of-the-line Sinn chronograph. It's packed full of all of their technologies that they have. Sinn is a brand that, on top of great aesthetics and great build quality, they are about these kind of engineering, technical aspects to their watches. There are things like hardened cases, gas-filled watches, special oils, all these different things. And this watch has got them all. So it's just one of the most durable watches. I mean, it has features that luxury watches can't even begin to compare to. And on top of that, it has a few other things that are really quite interesting. One is the movement in here. It has an in-house modified chronograph movement that gives it the functionality of the Lemania 5100, which we'll go over what exactly that means, but it already just makes it a very unique chronograph and gives it functionality that I personally really like. And then it is also Test-Off certified. Test-Off is a new certification. This was actually the first watch to be certified. That it's essentially like a DIN dive certification, but for pilot's watches. So it has to do with legibility, functionality, resistance to external forces, safety and compatibility. Think about magnetism, pressure, vibration, all the stuff that a pilot's watch might have to endure in a cockpit, while also being extremely legible in the day, extremely legible at night. Just all those things, that you think about but aren't necessarily. There's never really something that was like, yes, this watch is certified as to having all of those aspects. So this is certified with that, and that just makes it kind of proves that this is a true pilot's watch, really for pilots, that can be used, was tested for that. So if that's something you're into, this is really one of the top watches in those terms. Now the Sinn Ezm 10, like I said, it's the top of their line for their pilot's watches. It does have a higher price point than many other Sinns. It's $5,290 on the leather strap. But when we go through everything that is in this watch, all the technology it's packed with, I think you'll see that it blows away any other pilot's watch that's around $5,000. So let's take a closer look. The case of the Ezm 10 is where the technology of Sinn's technology kind of begins. But first, looking at the design, this is a large watch. It's definitely kind of large in the true kind of old-fashioned sense of a pilot's watch being very big for legibility, as well as usability with the hands. So from that perspective, I understand the size, though it is a very large watch in terms of wearability, at least for my wrist. So it's 46 millimeters from 9 to 3, 44 millimeters from 12 to 6, about 52 millimeters or so lug to lug, and 15.75 millimeters tall. So yeah, it's a big watch. It's really a wide watch. To counteract the size a bit, it is made out of titanium, but not just normal titanium, it's tegimented titanium. So that's kind of the first technology that's at play here. Tegimenting is a hardening process that is a signature to Sinn. I mean, other people have similar things, but tegimenting you'll see from Sinn only, and what that does is it hardens the outer layer, not a thin layer, but kind of more than enough to give it very, very high scratch resistance. Typically you see from them tegimented steel, so it is interesting that it's tegimented titanium. So it's lighter weight, but extraordinarily scratch resistant. And while it's lightweight, I mean, there's actually a solid amount of heft to this watch. It doesn't feel like an overly light titanium watch, but I imagine the weight reduction is still probably pretty significant compared to what this would feel like made out of entirely steel. So I think that's a good choice from them. Additionally, the finish on it is really beautiful. It's a very nice dark gray, bead blasted finish. Definitely looks a little bit different than steel. I think it's a very attractive look for the metal. One thing that's really cool about this design, perhaps my favorite thing about the case design, is how the pushers are made. And this also works with the watch being a little bit wider, but this helps it be a little bit more comfortable. So you'll notice that they are totally flush pushers that are then kind of marked in black. Actually, they're not totally flush. I should step back a second. They are ever so slightly raised above. So if you slide your finger on it, you can feel them. And there's a bevel going around the black that, these are very nicely finished. They're kind of a beautiful little piece, but they follow the flow of the case. To me, this does kind of refer to the famous Tutuma NATO chronograph, which was a military issue chronograph that was available in the 90s through 2000s. And the idea behind the flat pushers is largely that they don't grab anything, in a cockpit or anything. They won't like snag clothing or anything like that. It makes it safer, but it also, like I said, makes it more wearable. They're very, very nice to push, very usable here. This is the only watch in Sinn's lineup that has this kind of flush pusher. Just a very cool design feature. Between them, obviously, you have a very large crown. It is screwed down, very easy to grip. Just a nice, kind of simple, toolish crown. No fuss, easy to grab. In these pushers and crowns, they have their D3 seals, which are just, they're like Sinn's better than average seal. They let through a lot less moisture, everything like that, because, like I said, this is all about kind of the technology to make a longer lasting and more rugged watch. Now looking at the bezel, you have this is an interesting bezel. It's only on 2 watches in Sinn's lineup. To my knowledge, the Ezm 10, and then actually the Ezm 9, which is a similar watch without the chronograph. It has a sapphire insert, which you don't typically see. You don't see on too many Sinns. It has a nice look, kind of a little bit of a sheen to it. It's a 60-click bi-directional bezel. So in true pilot fashion, it goes either way because it's not an elapsed time. It's not, it's not a dive bezel. It uses their captive bezel system, so it is attached to the watch, not in the kind of standard kind of snap-on way. So if it's caught, it's not going to rip off or anything like that. Now, looking at one of the perhaps most significant technologies of this watch, as well as Sinn, something we've talked about before, is their AR technology. Actually, when we reviewed the Sinn Ezm 13, we talked a lot about that. I recommend looking at that as well. So that is a multi-part system. It starts with this little thing here, which is a copper sulfate capsule. What this does is it sucks moisture out of the atmosphere, essentially, within the watch. And, by lowering the moisture in there, there's less moisture that'll affect the oils, there's less potential of fogging, and it's a very minute amount, but in doing this, they are increasing the longevity, the life of the watch, as well as just, how well it will work. And what's interesting about these is over the life of the watch, over several years, maybe even more, this will turn from kind of a very, 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 very light blue to a darker blue. And when it's darker blue, it needs to be replaced, which is something that you can do through Sinn or their authorized service centers. Additionally, is that the watch is actually filled with AR, an inert gas. Initially, there was argon, I believe it still is. And what that does is basically, once again, lowers the potential moisture amount in the watch, because it's not filled with typical air. And because of that also, this has to be serviced by the proper people, because you opened it up, you could let the gas out. But once again, by lowering the moisture count in there, they're making the oils last longer, they're making movement last longer, they're making everything run better. It's just it's a technology on top of technology. We'll go further into, when we talk about the movement, there's even more technology within the movement itself to aid in the longevity of it. Like I said, this watch is just packed to the rafters with Sinn's tech. Let's see, very last, just look at the case back here. Solid case back, no fuss, matching titanium, Ezm 10 here. And interestingly, that little symbol there, which is also on the dial, is the test-off certification symbol. Looking now at the dial of the Sinn Ezm 10, it's part of their Ezm series, which is their mission timer series, so really legibility is at the forefront. But that's also true with all their test-off watches, so you really are getting like this double dose of just high legibility, very bold markers, no fuss, no extraneous details or anything like that. Even here, it does have a test-off symbol on the dial that is in a very, very, very dark gray on the black, so when you're looking at this at a glance, you don't see it. It's not a distraction or anything like that. If you look at other Ezm watches, you'll see that there's a familial language between them all. use of kind of certain rectangular shapes and everything. So this is a very, very Sinn looking watch in a very kind of modern, bold pilot design, one that I happen to think it's very attractive and it's very aggressive too. So yeah, just looking at the actual dial design, obviously it's a matte black surface here, on top of which the primary index are these large rectangles. They're illumined quite brightly. You have a double marker at 12. You'll see that on all the EZM lines. The index between the large markers is for the minutes, chronograph seconds, and chronograph minutes. One of the unique features of this watch with the movement, the SC01 movement, is that it has a central minute counter chronograph. And this is one of my favorite features of the watch. I'll go so far as to say my favorite feature about the watch. It's also my favorite feature about the Lemania 5100 movement. That's a movement that Sinn used to use a lot when it was still being made. And it's just one of these incredible movements, and especially for legibility. Like, it really is a purposeful movement. When you're looking at a chronograph, let's say you're in a cockpit and there's vibrations, are you really going to be reading a tiny subdial for the minutes, or are you going to be looking at the central dial? So here you have the central minutes right there, huge hand, cannot miss it, and it counts the full 60 minutes. So there's so much more visual significance to that. So this index, accordingly has to be very bright and very easy to read, which I think they perfectly achieve here. Looking now, there are 3 subdials. At 3 o'clock, you have a 24-hour hand. At 6 o'clock, you have the 12-hour counter for the chronograph, and then you have the active seconds for the watch at 9. I really like the execution here. So you have the chronograph is in orange, so it relates to the chronograph hands. That kind of separates the functionality out there, and then all of the timing functions are in white. Having a 24-hour hand makes a lot of sense. On a pilot's watch, obviously, as you're traveling around the world, you're going to be in, different time zones, going through AM, PM, whatever, but also on a military watch, it makes a lot of sense. It is a nice additional feature to a chronograph. I think sometimes when there's a 24-hour hand instead of another function, I'd rather have that other function. But here and on the Lemania 5100, I happen to like it quite a bit. Very useful for me when I'm in Europe and I can't get my 24-hour timing straight. But now looking at the other features of the watch, you'll see here, it might be a little bit hard to see, but actually above the hour counter, there's a little word. It's very close to the center. It's diapal. And that has to do with the movement, and I'll talk about that more in the movement as well, but it has to do with a frictionless escapement, which is something that Sinn has developed, which is also just incredibly cool. Looking at the hands, classic straight sword hands for the hour and minute. Once again, just kind of famous Sinn look here. Not exclusive to them, but it's something they've definitely utilized a lot. Very clear, works very well. And then the chronograph seconds and chronograph minute hands. You have this interesting use of orange and white stripes. I really like that look. It's definitely speaks to me to like a pilot language. An interesting thing with test off, I remember them saying this, was that orange was the preferred color for pilots because red was actually like more of a warning color. So as a standout color, orange made more sense. And just quickly, now I'll show you how this relates to another Sinn watch that I have. This is the 156. This is a watch they no longer make, but you can see how the kind of colors and the way it is all put together relates to the new watch. So I like that the kind of heritage from their older military-style watches is still in this piece. Looking now at the bezel insert, which adds some numerals and more graphic element to the dial, and actually makes the dial feel quite a bit larger. As mentioned before, it is a sapphire insert, so it has a gloss sheen to it on the top, and then you can see that it is like the actual graphic insert is below the sapphire. Actually, I like that look. It kind of gives it an interesting dimensionality to it. What's interesting also about this bezel insert is that it is a countdown bezel rather than your standard 5 through 55. So you'll just quickly notice it goes 5, 10. It's the other way around. And at first I was like, oh, that's a little odd, because now if you start the chronograph, the second isn't going to actually line up with the right seconds, right? It's like you'd be looking at, oh, it's 50 seconds, but it's really 10 seconds past. So, the way, though, you could use this is, oh, I need to count down 20 minutes. And so now 20 minutes is at the start. And then as it goes, it's going to count down and reach that. Obviously, you'd have to be looking and be aware of when it hits that, but that's just one way it could be used. You could also, you could do the same thing just on the normal minute hand. You could use that to count to 20 minutes. Then you could use that just as the chronograph. Additionally, and just know where obviously 5, 10, 15 is in your mind. With that said, for my own personal usage, I would love to see a 12-hour or a Zulu bezel on this for use for a second time zone. Obviously, that is something that can be useful for pilot's watches as well. Lastly, just considering the loom on this watch, it's very effective. Part of the test off certification is that this is very legible in day as well as in night. The loom on the dial itself, on the hands, it's on the markers, it's on the chronograph hands as well, and then on the bezel, everything is loomed, and quite brightly too. So when this watch is even in the sunlight for a little while and you go into a dim room, it's lit up quite nicely. Powering the Sinn Ezm 10 is the Sinn SC01 movement. As I said before in the dial section, the goal of this movement was to recreate the functionality of the Lomania 5100 movement, which is something that Sinn had used in a lot of various watches in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. And it's an incredible movement. It's not just because of how the original one was built, but also for its functionality. And I kind of already went over that, but the biggest feature being a central minute counter, which is extremely legible, extremely functional. If you ever have the chance to use a watch with a central minute counter, you will quickly see how just useful it is. At a glance for timing things, it's simply better from a purely legible and functionality standpoint than a small counter. So yeah, like we said, the biggest difference though between this and the original Lomania 5100, other than it's a totally different movement, that's the biggest difference really. This is based off of 7750, but is the arrangement of the hands. So on the original Lomania 5100, the 24-hour hand was actually up at 12, so it had the kind of 12-6-9 arrangement, what you would see on a normal 7750. So they moved the 24-hour hand here to 3 o'clock. I actually really like that layout arrangement. I think I prefer, generally speaking, a 3-6-9 arrangement because it kind of keeps the symmetry of the watch more intact. And it also just gives things a really nice visual balance here. So, when the watch is paused, you have all the kind of chronograph functions in this central column. Then you have time functions running the other way. Just very clear, very kind of easy to digest presentation. One of the other cool things, and I actually have to wait a little bit for the hand to get around, that's an interesting difference between this and the 5100, is how the minute hand moves on the chronograph. On the original, right now, it would be slowly moving over, so it's kind of like the minute hand is constantly in motion. On the Sinn SC01, it jumps at the basically at the end of the minute to the first second of the next minute. So when this hand gets around and reaches 60, the minute hand will actually move with it. And then every preceding second, it'll change at the top of the minute. So you can see there, just very cleanly jumped over, which is a nice feature so that, the minute hand is never really between it. So you can very just clearly read it's like, 2 minutes and 15 seconds past, or that you've been timing with it. Now there is another really, really big and significant technological feature to the SC01 of signature Sinn technology called diapal. Sinn, I guess in the early 2000s, wanted to create a system that improved on the way escapement worked by lowering the friction within the escapement. Most of the friction within the escapement comes from the rubies on the pallet and how they basically rub against the seal of the escapement. So that requires oil. They tried diamond palettes, and that's where the name Diapal comes from, which greatly reduced it, but didn't do so quite enough. So now they use some sort of nanotechnology coating, which obviously they don't give incredibly great details on because I'm sure it's extremely technical and proprietary. But what that does is actually allows it to be an oil-free escapement and in a near frictionless. I mean, they say frictionless, but I imagine it's got to be so low friction that it basically counteracts it. And what that does is it keeps the amplitude of the watch basically very even, longer, and for longer lifespan, as well as kind of allows for longer service intervals, everything like that. I mean, there's no oil there, so they don't have to worry about changing that. Additionally, in all their movements anyway, they use very special oils that allow for higher temperature variations and ranges and everything. So, on top of the cool functionality, you're also getting an incredibly kind of technologically forward movement. On the wrist, the Sinn Ezm 10 definitely makes a statement. It is a big, bold, aggressive pilot's chronograph. I mean, there's no way around it. This is not a subtle watch by any means, though it's not designed to be flashy or loud. It just, by virtue of the size and the really bold EZM design and just all these other elements, it's just a big, aggressive watch. And it's, like I said, it's quite large. You can see here on my wrist, it's a bit larger than my tastes kind of go for. I mean, it's not monstrously big. It's a little bit more svelte than like a huge dive watch, but it's definitely big. I think the lug to lug length here at 52 is verging on kind of my maximum, so there's a little bit of it kind of overhanging. But because of the titanium, it's not that uncomfortable, really. I mean, in fact, I've wearing it a bit. It's pleasant to wear. And I mean, the look, though, it's one of these things where like the look is so cool and dramatic and just in your face that like I can buy into it. I can buy into the size of it. I love looking at this now, seeing all 7 hands in action. Everything is so clear and legible. I mean, and that kind of speaks to what it is. This is a real instrument watch. I mean, Sinn calls their chronographs instrument chronographs, and here you can really get a feel for this. This is part of, this is part of the cockpit. This is part of the dash. This is something that is meant not just for, style or vanity. Like, we might wear them a little bit more. I mean, this is a truly a high functioning piece of equipment. So, from that standpoint, it all really clicks in place. And if that's, what you are looking for in your watch is the true kind of tool instrument quality, I think for a modern pilot watch, this is really, nailing it more than anything else. Looking at the strap now, it has a 22 millimeter lug width. It comes mounted to a Sinn signature D-Model Chronismo straps. I'm a big fan of these straps. They're extremely rugged. They work very well with pilots' watch designs because they flare out a little bit after the lug, and that kind of continues the lug shape around. Plus, you just have all of this textural detailing, padding, double stitching, the fold over here. It's like a piece of wrist armor. I don't know how thick. I think it's nearly 7 or 8 millimeters thick by the lug, thins out. They're just an exceptional, when you have something that's this well built and like with build and technology as a focus, you need a strap that's obviously going to kind of live up to those standards. Obviously, a bracelet would do it too, but for leather, I mean, this is where it's at. Orange stitching isn't my favorite thing. I think it's a little garish, it's a little obvious, but it does obviously work with the aesthetic going on here. It brings the orange out from the dial a little bit more. I personally would have liked just all black, but that's me. Certainly, you can switch it out when you are wearing it. It's just going to take any 22 millimeter strap. I think a Bund strap would be very cool on this as well. Certainly, a nylon pass-through strap would give this even more of an aggressive military feel. To wrap up, the Sinn Ezm 10 is just a beast of a watch from the brand. I mean, it's kind of the top of the line for them, especially for their pilots' watches and chronographs. It packs a ton of their technology in it, from tegimenting to the lubrication and friction-free escapement with their Diapal technology. to their in-house modified Valjoux 77050 movement called the SZ01, which on top of just being very cool that they took a movement and modified it very heavily to have their own functions, they built it to have the functionality of the Lemania 5100 chronograph, which, as I've said many times in the review as well as on the site, just an epic chronograph movement, and personally one of my favorites, with a central minute counter, which is a really indispensable function once you have used it on a watch. On top of that, just a very cool, very modern-looking, aggressive pilot's watch. And I think, there are, to me, the only real drawback of it is the sheer size of it. I mean, it is a big watch. I found it a little bit too large for my wrist. But obviously, that is something that comes down to taste and your own wrist size. So if you are have a larger wrist, I think, you'll be able to pull this one off. And then, the price. It is a higher price piece for Sinn. It's really the top of their line, $5,290. Certainly isn't everyday money, but for what this watch is packing, it's a value. It's a bargain even. I mean, this watch, nobody has technologies that can even compete to this watch. Not even a single technology. Most of their, these other brands, a luxury brand that at $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, other pilot watch brands, you can guess which ones. They don't have anything that is really quite so over the top, pilot oriented with all these just technologies to make it more resilient, more legible, as well as basically confirming those facts with their test-off certification. So, I think in the end of the day, this watch is it's not like it's not a watch for everybody. It's a watch for a select group of people who want all that stuff, people who perhaps need all that stuff in just, the most overbuilt, and just kind of aggressive modern pilot's chronograph. So, yeah, clearly I like it. It's a very cool watch. Please read the full review on Worn&Wound. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thank you.